Hey there, online world. Welcome aboard the Speculation Station, where we explore unconventional and fascinating viewpoints that may lack definitive evidence, but provide valuable dialogue and insight into the inner workings of our world. And today's topic is on UFO technology. And here with me today is our Peers team member, Mark Bailey, who is currently swimming in matrix numbers and creates our in-depth news article summaries for our weekly newsletter and has been absolutely instrumental in aiding with research and developing content for our work at Want to Know. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for being with me today in space.
It's so great to be here.
So, in this informal conversation, we'll discuss the most relevant and intriguing parts from these specific UFO technologies that have allegedly been recovered from crashes to how these otherworldly technologies might have helped accelerate the development of certain human technologies. And we also speak to the long-standing history of UFO secrecy and cover-ups that have prevented any real holistic understanding of the issue. We just finished our UFO Information Center. We spent weeks and hours of research pulling this comprehensive resource together. So, what's at the heart of the matter for us? We wanted to share a little bit about that. On my end, I'll just say that this is important to talk about, not just because it's fascinating and mind blowing to even fathom the existence of UFO technologies, but because this topic really challenges our understanding of reality and the universe and our place in it. This isn't some sort of abstract topic. Like, who are we in this larger universe? Pentagon recently released a report saying that ARROW, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the first major congressional investigation of the 21st century, has not found any convincing evidence of extraterrestrial technologies on Earth or of the existence of a classified program that had not been reported to Congress. Yet it soon became clear that the report actually had many mistakes and misrepresentations and didn't mention testimonies from top military and government officials over the years. We really feel a desire to share some of the most reliable information we've discovered in this process, and how this information actually challenges Arrow's recent findings. So, in having this conversation, how do we move beyond instant, neatly packaged narratives? I think healthy speculation can be a powerful way to open up to new ways of seeing and understanding the world without claiming we know the answers or even want to know the answers, right? We know that the mainstream media doesn't tell us the full story, so let's invite curiosity and suspend certainty. So, Mark, what's at the heart of the matter for you?
Technological advancement. I think the purpose of technology is to make human life better. And if there's a whole class of technology that's been recovered from these ET craft and then investigated and experimented with and then kept secret from everyone, that means that that whole class of technology is not being used for the betterment of all mankind. It seems important to at least try and understand what type of tech might be in play here and what the implications of that are.
Hmm.
Why don't we start with David Grush,
Okay.
because he's been in the news lately, and he is a former intelligence agency official. He worked for the NRO, he worked for other intelligence agencies, and he's recently been making the rounds with government officials and other, important people, talking about these secret UFO reverse engineering programs. One of the most interesting things he said wasn't to any government officials, it was to a relatively secret meeting of intelligence agency people and financial industry people in Manhattan. Some photos of the meeting were leaked, and there's some, eyewitnesses who have related what he said. And what he said was that one of these downed aircraft was as big as a football field inside, but outside it was only 40 feet long. And
Hmm.
so somehow it was warping space time.
Well, it's really interesting that you mentioned time distortion because that seems to be a commonality with some of the experiences that Navy pilots have had and some interesting people high up in the military who've been involved in recovering the material from these alleged crashes. The UFO you mentioned earlier, where it was the size of a football field inside, some people watching this may be aware of Daniel Sheehan, who's a public interest lawyer. He's participated in numerous landmark cases, including the Pentagon Papers, the Watergate break-in, and the Iran-Contra scandal. He actually allegedly talked to the person that was involved in recovering this craft, and that they actually had to use an excavator to get it out of the earth, and that this person went in it, and it was about 30 feet in diameter outside, but when he went into it, it was as big as a football stadium. It was making him nauseous because he was so disoriented that something so small from the outside was so big in the inside. Space was not the only warped dimension of the craft. That actually, when this person stumbled out, he felt like he was only in there for a few minutes, but then when he checked the clock, he was outside for 4 hours later. So, Sheehan declined to give further details, including a location and date and actual name. But we'll speak to why there's so much secrecy later on in this conversation. But it's really interesting because Daniel Sheehan also represents Luis Elizondo, who was the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, which was a classified program until Luis Elizondo came out, blew the whistle, and helped leak two classified Navy UFO videos to the New York Times. In a fascinating interview, Elizondo actually discusses how a pilot who had a close encounter with a UFO likely experienced some sort of warping of space time. Here's the quote. This is what the pilot said to Elizondo. Lou, it's really bizarre. It felt like I was there for only 5 minutes, but when I looked at my watch, 30 minutes went by, but I only used 5 minutes worth of fuel. How is that possible?
But even scientists don't know how any of that stuff works. And I think that's maybe good to just highlight is that the mechanisms underneath that type of space-time distortion are not known to our best scientists, unless in secret, which we'll get to later.
Possibly the most compelling information we've seen was the book that Colonel Philip Corso wrote called The Day After Roswell. Or a year before his death, he came forward to share his astounding knowledge and involvement in covert government operations regarding UFO phenomena. He was actually the former head of the Foreign Technology Desk and the Research and Development Program within the U.S. Army, and he was a member of President Eisenhower's National Security Council. So talk about someone with a lot of credentials, someone who's high up there within the Pentagon. This man was really interesting because he not only in his book, Day After Roswell, alleges that he saw the alien bodies in the crates at Fort Riley, but that years later, he would head the foreign technology desk, as I said earlier. He was tasked with looking at some of the materials recovered from the Roswell crash to see what could be exploited for military purposes and what reverse engineering projects we could do to replicate some of this alien technology being discovered. For those who aren't aware of what reverse engineering is, it's the process of taking apart something and seeing how it works. And usually the goal is to replicate it. Just really quick about Roswell. In 1947, something crashed in the desert. And really quickly, the U.S. Army put out a official statement saying they recovered a flying saucer, which wowed everyone naturally. And then just hours later, they came out quickly saying, no, it was a weather balloon, and included a photo of a man posing with a weather balloon. Now, interestingly thing about this man, Major Jesse Marcel, who was tasked with going out into the fields in Roswell and actually investigating the wreckage and the material. And it wasn't until the 90s that Marcel actually came out that a flying saucer really did crash in Roswell and that he participated in a large government cover up, and that the wreckage he found in the fields of Roswell was, quote, not of this earth. So it really wasn't until Marcel that deeper truths came out about Roswell. A lot of people were dead or sworn to silence, and there's a lot of books about this of people that have interviewed people that lived in Roswell, military personnel in general who were involved in the incident.
Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, he became a firm believer that something extraterrestrial came to Roswell in 47 after he personally went there and interviewed a lot of the people in the surrounding area.
Yeah, and in our UFO Information Center, we talk about a 12-year-old schoolgirl who allegedly saw some of the material that was recovered. And it was like this fascinating material that couldn't be burned, it couldn't be cut. And then the next day, a military police came to her house the next day, asked the mother to leave, and basically threatened her that if she spoke about what she saw, the desert is a big place and no one would find her or her family. So this came from someone who lived in Roswell, who shared her personal experience. So the whole trajectory of Corso's book was pretty much how they worked to seed ET technology to American industry giants, mixing human technology with ET technology without even telling the companies where, these patents, these ideas came from. And these were companies like Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, General Electric. So to even investigate these technologies, it had to be separate and independent from any normal weapons development program. Hence the foreign technology desk, because instead of calling anything they found extraterrestrial from alleged crashes, they would just call it foreign technology, throw it in the hopper with the rest of the mundane stuff, and they could therefore investigate these technologies without fully being seen. So let's talk about the first technology that is quite intriguing. So there was a material around the spacecraft and the alien bodies themselves. And according to these medical examiner reports, this material, you couldn't cut it with a razor or burn it. It was extremely tough and unburnable and durable, but super thin and light.
And it appeared to have been engineered at the molecular scale, which was highly unusual to scientists of the era.
Mm. So Corso was thinking, how can we, make use of this super tenacity material? And he actually discovered, according to his book, that DuPont and Monsanto were already looking into simulating spider silk because of its strength. DuPont and Monsanto had defense contracts with the army to work on a type of body armor that would protect against injuries from explosives and guns. Corso actually would write that he hand carried this material to his meetings with these companies like DuPont and Monsanto, and he showed the fabric to the scientists. So it's 1965, and DuPont announced the creation of the Kevlar fabric that in the 70s would become the Kevlar bulletproof vest that's in common use today in the armed services and law enforcement agencies.
And Kevlar also has uses as protective equipment like gloves and wrist guards and things like this. So it's in wide use across industry.
Mm. Corso would even say that these fibers on the skin of the aliens and the Roswell craft itself became the inspiration for an entirely new generation of strategic aircraft and the Kevlar bulletproof vests.
And the timeline does fit. If the development of Kevlar were accelerated, it would take many years to study the material and then many more years to replicate it using things here on Earth.
So the second technology that we'd like to call into discussion, ET headbands. This was really interesting. This was part of the recovered material from the Roswell crash. And Corso was really taken by the reports from engineers at the Wright Patterson Air Force Base that were looking at these headbands, and they were just noticing there were no buttons, no switches, no wires. No one even knew how to turn it on or off. Corso had a whole chapter about even just examining the alien bodies and how their skull was much larger than ours. And so these headbands were meant to fit their heads. So there were only, a handful of officers who had heads big enough to actually try it on. And the ones who did had really interesting experience. Some had like a really tingling sensation in their heads, some got a searing headache. I think there were even reports of dancing colors in the insides of their eyelids when they rotated the device around their head. Corso started speculating that maybe there were sensors on the headband that stimulated different parts of the brain. The discovery of these ET headbands, paved the way for long term brainwave research that he alleges eventually became a component of navigational control systems for some of the Army's most sophisticated helicopters and the computer game industry, that this could be available to American consumers as part of their video game experience.
We're talking about brain computer interface technology in 1947. So that would predate any brain computer interface technology that I'm aware of. And there's been a lot of progress advancing that kind of tech, especially within the military.
Yeah, we just summarized a news article about the dawn of neurowarfare and neuroweapons, and that the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which is like a highly controversial Pentagon program, has directly and indirectly funded many invasive neural interface technology companies in the US with the purposes of using it for warfare. And I think it was at least 40 neurotechnology related programs that DARPA has actually initiated. Some of these technologies were speculated to be used for evoking certain emotions in soldiers.
Right, and there's, the good uses and scary uses of that type of technology. One of the most promising areas involves giving people who've lost the use of their limbs a way to control robotic limbs or computers. On the downside is the idea of microchips in brains for control purposes. A lot of it is built on Jose Delgado's work. In 1965, he implanted a microchip into a bull's brain and then, using a remote control, stopped the bull mid charge.
Mm.
And from that point on, everybody knew that that could be done. You could remote control an animal with that tech. And a lot's happened since 1965. I'm sure things have gotten a bit more sophisticated. In the consumer market, now we're seeing Neuralink. Neuralink is just did its first successful implant, and that promises to be an interface between your brain and your computer. But even Neuralink is relatively primitive compared to the ET headbands in Corso's reports.
So isn't it interesting that, they allegedly uncovered this ET headband from the Roswell crash? Corso concluded that these ET headbands were connected to the minds of the ET beings, and it was used to actually navigate and control the spacecraft, which is why our third focus is the spacecraft itself that Corso studied extensively through the reports from the engineers. Fascinatingly enough, had no traditional navigational controls, no control sticks, wheels, pedals, no power supply, nor no fuel, no buttons to even say on. The engineers suggested that we consider the Roswell craft not as a spacecraft, but a time machine, that the craft was engineered to be able to withstand time and space, that the craft itself was navigated by brain waves and was basically an extension of the ET's bodies because it was tied into their neurological systems. This super tenacity material, the headband, the ET's brains, and the entire craft worked together as a holistic unit.
One alternate theory would be that the craft itself isn't controlled by the ET headsets. It's remote controlled from some other location in time space,
Mm.
like a drone. And then maybe the headsets were for the ETs to get readings while they were here or something like that.
Hmm. Interesting. And what I find particularly interesting is that Corso, in his investigations of where to conduct these weapons development reverse engineering research programs, they were looking at places like Area 51, where a lot of super secret projects were being conducted. And it seemed to fit the profile of the kind of research that they wanted to do. And Corso even mentioned Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works group and possibly even utilizing the Skunk Works group as a means of understanding this technology so we can exploit it for military purposes. What's especially interesting about the mentioning of Skunk Works is that a man actually came out and discussed his role allegedly as a contractor for Lockheed Martin and the Skunk Works unit. And his name was Don Phillips. He was a retired Air Force pilot, a special aircraft engineer. He came forward to talk about his experience at Skunk Works, which was kept secret until 2014, which was basically their secret weapons and technology unit. He basically confirmed that they were working on reverse engineering programs with alien technology and that some of these technologies paved the way for everyday things that we use now. And he came out as part of the Disclosure Project, which was a huge effort by medical doctor and UFO researcher Stephen Greer, who listed tons of military and government personnel who've been directly or indirectly involved in UFOs over the years who've been silenced. So Corso, in his responsibility to see what could be reverse engineered out of what he in his possession from the Roswell crash, his research and his recommendations would inform the MJ-12. So in Corso's book, he confirms the existence of MJ-12 as an ad hoc group of military, government, and scientists who were dispersed everywhere throughout the military system and industry. And so basically, how Corso says it, and it's such a good quote that I feel compelled to read out loud right now, that this group, the MJ-12, would form nothing less than a government within the government, sustaining itself from presidential administration to presidential administration, regardless of whatever political party took power, ruthlessly guarding their secrets while evaluating every new bit of information on flying saucers they received. But at the same time, they would allow disclosure of some of the most far-fetched information, whether true or not, because it would help create a climate of public attitude that would be able to accept the existence of extraterrestrial life without a general sense of panic.
By definition, what you're talking about is a deep state because it's run by people who are in government, but they're not elected officials. So it doesn't matter who's in office, they'll
Mm.
still be in power. And so they can make plans over long periods of time and then just kind of like steer the ship, and it doesn't matter who gets elected.
Mm.
Getting into the reason for keeping the technology secret, there's national security interest and business interest. Anything that could weaken our position in relation to our adversaries, we're going to keep secret. Anything that could be profitable to fund black budget programs, that's going to be secret too. And then it'll be released in a little bit here, a little bit there in the most profitable way for the companies involved.
What do these defense contractors know about these technologies that we don't? Because in our research, we know that most people within government, Congress, most sitting presidents, don't even have the special clearance to even know of these alleged programs, right?
Right. I mean, wasn't right after Jimmy Carter got elected, didn't he go to George Bush and try to get answers about the UFO issue and he was told he didn't have clearance?
Yep, that was told by Danny Sheehan, the public interest lawyer, who's, really quite credible because he's been directly involved in some of these high-level legal cases that really look at the inner workings of our government. When you look at some of these leaked memos, like the one between a scientist that worked with Hal Puthoff on the CIA's psychic spying and remote viewing program, and the Defense Intelligence Agency director, Admiral Thomas Wilson. This came out in 2019 and it was big, big news because it basically revealed even more evidence that there were reverse engineering technology programs existing, where the focus was on technologies, quote, not of this earth. It was not man-made. Um, and you even have the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency seeking to know more about these programs for national security interests and being told that he didn't have the clearance and he was denied access to this information. A lot of the work has been outsourced to defense contractors. Senator Harry Reid of Nevada said that he believes that Lockheed Martin is in possession of some fragments from alleged UFO crashes, right? And he's been super involved in UFO disclosure and constantly running up against this whole you don't have the clearance to look at this stuff. I like to think of astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who we mentioned earlier, that at first he thought it was just leadership officials just not ready to handle that UFOs could even exist. And the more he inquired, he realized that it's actually a cabal of organizations with a heavy profit motive. Think of what it could mean in terms of space travel with control of UFO machinery, or even what it could mean if we could actually successfully exploit these technologies for warfare purposes.
I mean, if you were the deep state, you wouldn't want to destabilize financial markets by introducing a rogue product into the marketplace.
Mm.
You want to make sure that growth is steady and constant. The whole thing of capitalism is perpetual growth. And so there can't be any big disruptions, even positive ones, because that'll mess up your plan.
So, Mark, if you were an influential voice within the military intelligence complex and you became aware of these technologies, what do you think would be a healthy disclosure or a healthy approach to dealing with these technologies if these are all real?
If I had unlimited power in government, um, which I am unlikely ever to have,
Right.
I would form a special purpose corporation. I would make all Americans shareholders of this corporation.
Mm.
And then I would use that corporation to hold all the patents to all these technologies and license their use in a responsible way. Even if they're dangerous, and I would say especially if they're dangerous. A lot of people get really nervous about that sort of thing just because they could have big downsides, weapons potential, etc. The nuclear bomb plans have been public for a long time, and no one has built a nuclear bomb and detonated it in that whole time. And the reason for that is that they're very hard to do right. And I've got a feeling that all of these ET technologies would be 10 times harder to do right.
We live in a system where the people aren't trusted. What you're calling for is something that would really defy kind of the mode of operation when it comes to how our military intelligence complex works. I mean, inherently in all their covert operations is the lack of trust in the people to decide, for themselves what they should even do in foreign countries with all of CIA's and the military's meddling in other countries, destabilizing economies. If the people discovered these technologies, they wouldn't want to exploit it and use it against the enemy. The moment that they even got these technologies, the first thing they do is, ooh, let's exploit it.
Yeah?
Like, which I think says a lot, about who runs our system and how they operate. We even summarized a news article recently about a select Senate committee hearing. Senator Frank Church conducted the first congressional investigation into intelligence agency abuses. And he used a select committee hearing that was basically a task force focused on looking at intelligence agency corruptions. And what they found was astounding. What they found was, secret assassination plots, mind control programs that were done on thousands of unsuspecting victims, poison darts that can cause heart attacks. There are some people calling for some sort of select committee hearing about UFO disclosure.
A good step towards that might be something that was actually a little bit less democratic, where you have a special investigator in the Department of Defense tasked with auditing all the technologies with weapons potential in all the big companies. And then, from that audit, they would get the tech that was reverse engineered, and then they could figure out, how to disclose it appropriately to Congress.
It's interesting you mentioned that because that leaked memo I was talking about between the former DIA director, Admiral Wilson, and the scientist Eric Davis was talking about how, the DIA director was told he didn't have access to these programs. So, according to the leaked document, these gatekeepers formed out of necessity to protect themselves following an audit investigation that drew unwanted attention to the program. This investigator that was heading this audit investigation threatened to blow the program's cover until um the Pentagon chief over this secret program was gave this investigator a tour and was officially briefed on the program. And according to this memo, the program managers after that reached a formal agreement with the Special Access Program Oversight Committee to prevent that from happening again. And so the agreement established extremely strict criteria for the circumstances under which anyone could get access in the future. The contractor committee, this gatekeeper committee, consisted of the program director, security director, and the attorney, and that no U.S. government officials could gain access unless they met the criteria. Apparently, according to this leaked document, they created a situation in which an audit would never find this secret program. Part of what is really missing from, UFO disclosure conversations, but I would even extend this to a lot of the controversial issues we face now, is this lack of open dialogue about what has been discovered and what has been documented. So this is why speculation is so important because we call in different perspectives and points of views and we just look at it and we have open dialogue about it. As Jacques Ellul said, propaganda ends where simple dialogue begins.
It's also fun because the world is so big and so weird, and we only have a little window into it at any given time. And so anything that makes that window a bit bigger, I love it.
So, for whoever's tuning into this, we totally invite you to pop in and share your thoughts, share your questions, share your insights with us in the comment section. And if you follow us at WantToKnow.info, we send out free weekly newsletters. We're going to continue visiting the Speculation Station on various topics, not just UFO technology. But this is our first of many. So thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed.